Hey, this is Eric with programwitheric.com, and today I thought it'd be interesting if we look at how we can use Ember.js and have it use Ember Data with Reddit. Before, few months ago, I created this Ember.js example gallery app with Reddit data, and when I created this app, all I did was I used the model, and then I used jQuery with Ember, and I just got the data that way. But today I thought it'd be interesting if I could do the same kind of concept, but instead of using jQuery, I'd actually use Ember Data. So for us to do that, we're going to have to override and change some of the built-in functions and try to get it all working here. So I've already created an app called My Hook Example, and it doesn't have anything in it right now. I just created it. I made sure to add an application template file there, an index file. There's really nothing in it. So let's get started. So I'm going to go ahead and create. See here at the bottom, I'm inside Vim here using nerdtree. So I'm doing some commands here at the bottom. Ember G. I'm going to create a route called R. Alright, and if I look at my routes now, refresh it, and now my R route. But what I really want to do for the route is I want to have a dynamic segment, that is. So I can put in my own path here. So I'm going to have it R, and then I'm going to call this subreddit. And that'll be my path here. So let me save it. And you can see I got an error because I didn't put in the right brackets here. So we'll do bracket here. Try it again. Okay, now it's happy. You can see here all I am creating is dynamic segment called subreddit. And to see that it works, we know we can create a model here, and inside that model we'll have params, and that params will become directly from the URL. So we can put an alert here for, let's say, params.subreddit, just to make sure it's working. So we can do R Eric. Oh, see, it says Eric here, so we know that the model's working here. We don't really have anything created yet for this route. If we look here, we do have this R. So this is the Reddit /R route. You can see here, here's my pop-up, says Eric. This is the Reddit R route. So we know it's working there. I can put a break in here. And we click back and we go back to it. So let's go ahead and delete this alert here, but we can see we're definitely passing the params from the URL directly in here. But to really make this work, what we need to do is we need to take a look at the JSON API adapter. And here's the API for it. Might be kind of hard to see. And there's a lot of different methods you can use, and what we're going to do is override one of these methods. And we also have some properties we can use. So the one we want to start off with is host. So by convention, with the JSON API adapter, it'll just use the URL of the local host, or whatever host it's on, to do its mapping. So when you go to / if we were doing records, if we were trying to find records or using Ember Data, it would just assume that we're wanting to connect to the local host. So it would be like or the host here, so it would be /R, whatever. But we want to connect to Reddit, so we're going to go ahead and generate a adapter for the R. Okay, and if we look here, now we have adapter. By default, it's the JSON API adapter. So now we can set a host, which we want it to be http://www.reddit.com. There we go. We'll do reddit.com. Okay, so what we want to try to do is we're getting information from Reddit, and if you look here, I already have it open, but we can take a look, and if you go to any Reddit subreddit, which is designated by R here, and we put in the name of the subreddit, you can put .json afterwards, and it'll load a JSON representation of the data. And inside there, you have a few levels. You have data, and inside that data, you have children, and inside children, you have another data, and then that's where you get a bunch of information we want, like the domain, the subreddit, the title, the URL, permalinks, the thumbnail. So we want all this information. So we're going to have to do some overriding here. So first, let's go ahead and create a model for R. We'll just call it R. And if we look over here, here's our R, and we're going to go ahead and uncomment that out. And we can, let's say we want to grab the title, and it's going to be a string. And finally, we want to, from the route, we know we have this params here, but let's just say we want to return this.store.query, and we're going to use R. So we're going to return R here. And you might be wondering why we're using .query here. We have quite a few choices available to us for our data store. If you look at the API documentation, query is nice because later on we'll need to grab the query itself, because we're going to do something called, we're going to normalize the response in our serializer, and that query is going to be passed to it. And we'll need that to find out, we'll need that elsewhere in the code when we override the UrlForQuery as well. So I'll show you that in a minute. So if we go back to our example here, let's inspect it. Let's see what happens when we go to /r/pics. And we get a big error. So it says, while processing R, assertion failed. You need to pass a query hash to the store query method. Assertion failed. You need to pass a query hash to the store's query method. So it's basically saying that what we're doing is wrong and it doesn't make sense to it. So let's take a look back at the code. So first off, this is not going to, well, first it says it's query hash, so we have to pass in a query hash. So let's pass in params as the second one and see what happens. So now we get a different error. So error while processing route, Ember Data get request. It's doing reddit.com/r, but then it's just putting an S afterwards, and so that doesn't return anything correctly. So the URL, you can hear rs 0 equals p, 1 equals I, 2 equals c. So it's trying to, it thinks this pics needs to be in this format. And obviously that's wrong, so that's not going to work. And so what we need to do is, let's go ahead and we'll take a look at our adapter again. And we notice, if you look at the JSON API adapter and we look at the documentation for it, we have something called UrlForQuery, and has the query and model name. So what we want to do is and it returns a URL. So we want to change the way this works. So instead, by convention and by default, it's doing this URL, but we obviously don't want that. So let's see if we can create our own. So we're going to UrlForQuery, And so we're going to return a string. We're going to use string interpolation. This is part of ES6, or template literals. And we're going to do this dot host that we defined earlier. And then we're going to do query. And you can see here, and we really want .json afterwards as well. And if you do a debugger here and then reload it, it stops at the exact place, and we can take a look. Queries picks, so that's where we want on the end of our string here. So when we want to build this URL, we copy and paste it here. You get reddit.com, but it looks like we missed the slash there, /r/pics. So we can fix that. So we want to go this. Let's do this. We'll just add this in ourselves in the host. I mean, we do have access to the model name too, just R, so we could do something like this. This we can do slash, and then we can do query, model name, and we need to surround those by these brackets. There it is. Let's see if that works. Now we can just copy and paste this, or what we had before. Yep, that looks good. So let's delete this out, the debugger, restart it. But we can still get an error that the resource object with an undefined type, assertion failed. So what it's saying is it's definitely going to the right URL. It's, in this case, it's going to pics.json. We just double checked that from the URL. But it doesn't have the resource hash. We don't have it in the correct format because, as you know, the JSON API format needs to look quite a bit different. It needs to look like this. So we need to have this. We have this object here. We have data, and then we have an array of items inside of it. So we almost have it. We have data, but we don't have the other things we need, like the ID or the attributes, for that matter. So let's go ahead and to do that, we can look at the JSON API Serializer class that I'm on here, and we can change the way, this is the serializer, the way data comes back from the server, and we expect it to be in this format. So we can change the format as we see fit. So one of the easiest ways to do that is to use the normalize method, the normalizeResponse method. So if we go right here, this is kind of the Swiss Army knife of normalizing the response. We can take the whole payload from the data and change it however we wish, and then we have to return the JSON API compliant document object back. However, you do have options. We could, since we are using query, we could normalize the query response like this, and this would just change any query responses. However, just for the sake of this demo, we're going to go ahead and just use the normalizeResponse. So if we go back here, so this is the method that we need. We'll go back here, and now we can go and look into our serializer, which I have not created yet. So I'm going to Ember.js Serializer R. Great. And I'll refresh everything. Here's our serializer. And we'll insert in our normalize response. Now if you can take a look at what this looks like. By the way, if you do return this under super ... arguments, this will just run it as it normally does, but you can run a debugger here and we can just take a look at what it looks like. So we're in rpix, we're in the debugger here in this normalize response, and we can take a look at the payload. And here's the same payload that we saw before. We have objects, we have a data, and we have this array of children, 26. So this is exactly the same thing as if we went to the URL here. By the way, I have a plugin for Chrome, that's why it looks like this. Otherwise it would just kind of look like this raw data. But I have it parsed, so I can actually read the JSON for you. So yeah, so we have the data in this format, so now we should be able to take this payload and put it in the correct format and return it. So that's pretty simple. I'll go ahead and comment this out. And we can return, we're returning an object. We're going to go data here, and we're going to go payload, data. We know the information's in the children here, so we have to go payload, data, children, and that's the array of data. And then we know this is an array, so we're going to use we're going to map it here. So ES6 map here. And we'll do fat arrow for function. Just do this. And so inside our data we want an ID, and I was trying to think of what a good ID was. When I looked at the data here, I noticed that there is an ID which I'm assuming is unique in the data, so I went ahead and used that. So that's info.data.id. We want a type, so we're going to use, I'll just call it Reddit as the type, and then attributes, we're going to do info.data. So what that says to me is that, you know, we're taking this whole block here, this whole data block inside the children, and this is all, this whole data block is going to be our attributes. So we're going to have domain, band, media, we're going to have everything in here, which would be really nice. And that should be it. Make sure I closed everything. Alright, I'm going to save it and delete the debugger. Don't need it. Refresh. And we have one bug here, so one sec. Okay, I think we actually need to return the data. Oops. And we'll create the return data here. Okay, let's see if that's it. Nope, still one other issue. Unexpected token. Yep, we got to take out this. Okay. But yeah, we took this out here. But now we're saying you try to push data type Reddit, but no model could be found with that name. So we actually need to type Reddit here. Type R. Okay, great. It looks like it got it. And we can check to see if it got it. If we go to Ember here, and we look at our data, okay, we see 26 items, we see the ID, and we have the titles. So great, it looks like it grabbed everything that we needed. So now we need to go in, we can make sure it's correct, so we'll go here, we'll have an each model as info, we'll close it, and now we can go info.title, break between the each. Alright, here's all the different titles. Woohoo! And just to make sure it works, let's grab one more piece of information. So let's say we wanted to grab the number of comments, num_comments. So we'll go back to the model here, we'll add num_comments. We'll just pull it over as a string. And now we go back to here, and we can also now have info num_comments. Num_comments. And one sec. Oops, I think I know what I have wrong. I gotta go num_comments. 2 M's. There we go. So now we see, I'll put break here. Now we can see each one of the titles and how many comments each one has. So that gives you a quick example of how to switch over this program I had before to now using Ember Data. Once again, if I look at the Ember Inspector, I can see that I have data in here. I have my columns, title, number of comments. And you're probably thinking, well, why would you want to do this? I mean, definitely once you have it, once you've extended your adapter and your serializer and you have it inside the data store, I think it's a little easier to see. You can see the title, you can see the number of comments. Now it's really easy to add more attributes. You can find out what these attributes are, they're named correctly. We're not doing a bunch of Ajax calls. It's all done in the background for us, so we're all set. Thank you. If you have any questions, leave the comments below, and take care.